Enlightening Crisis, A Vision for a Post-COVID-19 World by the International Network of Engaged Buddhists. The COVID-19 pandemic is a global crisis that threatens us in ways not seen since the world wars of the 20th century. Much local and international commerce, along with travel, have come to a halt. Health systems are overwhelmed. Large populations in many countries endure lockdowns, social distancing, and realistic fears of sickness and death. The pandemic has interrupted numerous mechanisms of globalization, a term that can be defined as the contemporary phenomenon in which capital, business, and people have an unprecedented ability to move freely around the world, bringing illusions of greater wealth and well-being to all with very mixed results. Yet, as with all crises, the COVID pandemic provides opportunities to reflect on and rethink the very structures of our societies. Numerous organizations worldwide have been preparing the ground for decades, building the new within the shell of the old. With each war, genocide, forced displacement, environmental tragedy, and national economic meltdown, progressive organizations are responding with sustainable grassroots solutions and alternatives to these crises. The International Network of Engaged Buddhists has been a part of this global movement since its founding in 1989. Over the past 30 years, INEB has been working at the grassroots level throughout Asia and with partners and new members in other parts of the world. From this fundamental orientation, INEB is developing a vision for a post-COVID-19 world with these four essential areas arranged as a mandala. In Buddhism, one always enters a mandala from the east, so let us start with Dharmic Economics, right livelihood, and holistic development.
What we are seeing now during the COVID crisis is an exacerbation of a pre-existing, unsustainable economic paradigm. A system based on heightening levels of consumption that have created vast gaps in health and security between the wealthy and the working class. Increased conflict among communities fighting for such resources has ensued, leading to the exacerbation of social inequality, anxiety, insecurity, and fear. Human greed and conflict have in turn led to the collapse of environmental security, and yes, epidemics and pandemics. To confront this suffering, Buddhism starts by envisioning a new source of values we call Dharma. Dharma, which can be translated as natural truth, can guide us out of the present mainstream understanding of economics through the associated values of sufficiency, generosity, interdependence, and relationship. The principle of subsidiary is another value Buddhists share with other religious traditions, in which economic relations and exchange are promoted at increasingly local levels. Buddhists also promote an economy based on exchange and the sharing of natural abundances, not one focused on financial capital and the creation of artificial scarcity. This is the building of a capital of people, community, and nature that increases through compassion and relationship. From this standpoint in values and ethics, we move into practice. Since the end of the colonial period, Buddhists throughout Asia have been using Buddhist teachings and practices to develop an economic middle way between capitalism and socialism. We have seen this in the Sarvodaya Shramadana movement in Sri Lanka, one of the pioneers of microcredit banking, who began such work in the 1950s and 60s. We've also seen it in the revolutionary development of gross national happiness in the tiny Buddhist kingdom of Bhutan in the 1970s, which has now become a new method of economic reorientation around the world. INEB is developing further new faces of this movement seen in these four initiatives. We first visit the work of sufficiency economy in Thailand, where there's been a movement of what we call Thai development monks since the 1970s and 80s. Developing what are called the four benefits of sufficiency: sufficient food, sufficient housing, sufficient daily household needs, and sufficient and wholesome environment in rural areas in Thailand that have been marginalized and destroyed through deforestation and corporate agriculture. Moving into neighboring Myanmar, we see another example of the microcredit movement begun earlier by Sarvodaya in Sri Lanka. Since the opening up of their society in the early 2010s, a Buddhist-based group called Wangmetta, meaning Circle of Loving Kindness, has developed a microcredit sharing system based on the Buddhist values of generosity and support for the community. It is now spread over large parts of Shan State and northeast Myanmar, with over 134,000 members. But INEB's work is not just in the global south. Look at Japan. We can see a movement for energy sufficiency by Buddhist groups responding to the nuclear problem there. As with Thailand, Buddhists have identified the benefits of sufficiency in three forms: reducing reliance on massive and inefficient national power grids, divesting from fossil fuel and nuclear-fueled systems, and building a people's Dharmic economy for community-based social welfare and social capital. On the left, we have the new company Terra Energy that was just founded in 2019 to provide temples and their parishioners with cleaner energy while putting the profits back into community development initiatives begun by the temples. Finally, we look at a growing global movement called Good Market, which represents INEB's unique ability to weave local initiatives into international networks. Good Market was first developed in Sri Lanka as a self-financing, not-for-profit social enterprise. It now connects people all over the world in what we call the gift economy, or Dharmic economy, helping them to locate and connect to social enterprises, responsible businesses, and change makers.
With the understanding that our economies and our environment are deeply co-conditioned, we naturally move into our second sphere of environment and sustainable interbeing. What we are seeing is that the COVID emergency and the climate crisis are expressions of a single crisis, that is, the broken relationship we have with our planet. These two crises are global, transcending national borders, yet are easier to manage for the wealthy while deeply impacting those who are marginalized, whether it be economically, racially, ethnically, or religiously. The two have come together now to offer an opportunity for change. As Buddhists, we again look to our values for guidance. What we call eco-dharma covers a wide variety of concepts to express our interdependence or interbeing with the environment, such as dependent co-arising, where we move from a system of entropy in which nature is consumed and depleted to a cyclical system in which resources are constantly being renewed. The emphasis in Buddhism on all sentient life moves us to an understanding of humans as part of a larger ecosystem of life and the need to engender diversity in all our systems to enhance adaptability and wisdom. From these standpoints, we developed the Bodhisattva or Ecosattva path, in which work for personal well-being is inseparable from work for social and environmental well-being. From such values, INEB members over the decades have built eco-communities based around their temples. In the last 5 years, INEB has begun to integrate this work through the Eco-Temple Community Development Project. Here we see 3 temples based around the design component that temples manifest ecological values on material, relational, and spiritual levels. The project has developed a 6-point seed planting system, in which work in one area plants the seeds for developing other areas to create a cyclical economy in which human capital and natural capital perpetually enrich each other.
From this practice of diversity for the well-being of the planet, we naturally move to our third sphere of cultural diversity and coexistence. COVID is calling us to address our inner ecology as well, through psychological and relational healing. Latent forms of racial discrimination and stereotyping have increased as individuals, communities, and nations have reacted in fear to the pandemic, uncertainty, and economic pressure. Unfortunately, unified systems of beliefs and devotional practices in many religions often become entangled with nationalism, making these problems worse. Therefore, equality, cultural diversity, and coexistence are key areas for engagement. INEB has been working in these areas for many years and has developed, again, concepts and values for the practice of social harmony, rooted in the core teaching of the Four Noble Truths. The first of these is the truth of confronting suffering, which means to listen deeply to the suffering of others, by creating safe space to speak, especially for the marginalized. From there, we discover and called out the structural and cultural causes of oppression that we have uncovered through our sharing. We then have the basis for promoting feelings of mutual accommodation and gratitude among communities as we struggle together against the collective forms of greed, anger, and delusion. Finally, we work and engage in collaborative activities to support each other's communities. From this standpoint, INEB has developed two international interfaith networks. One is the Interfaith Climate and Ecology Network, founded in 2012, for religions all over the world to share their common values of interconnection with other sentient life. Headquartered in Seoul, Korea, ICE works specifically within Asia to wisely influence national public policy and to stimulate and strengthen diplomatic discussions around climate change at the international level by Asian religious communities. The ICE network not only engages in advocacy work, but also works at the grassroots level, having played an important role in developing the Eco Temple Community Development Project that we have already looked at. The other important INEB interfaith initiative is the International Forum on Buddhist-Muslim Relations, initiated in 2013 out of a concern for growing Buddhist-Muslim conflict in South and Southeast Asia. BMF develops tools for constructive engagement in strategic action to go beyond existing conflicts and to bring together religious leaders for education in the complex play of social, political, and economic spheres that adversely affect religious communities, and further, to open them to collaborations with like-minded experts in these fields.
We now turn to the final sphere of our mandala, which, when we combine all these previous spheres of Dharmic Economics, Eco-Dharma, and cultural diversity together, we create the foundations of good governance and peace. During the COVID crisis, we've seen how central governments, global corporations, and international government agencies are pouring energy and capital into restarting the faltering global economy. However, many of these efforts are just further marginalising the environment, the common worker, and our cultural traditions. At the same time, we are seeing many nations take an inward turn towards populism, isolationism, and virulent ethno-nationalism. The challenge at hand is how can we truly participate in our governance and achieve higher paradigm solutions beyond the limitations and narrow thinking of our political and economic leaders. Again, INEB turns to its values and its previous visionary political leaders that have realised non-violent social change through dedicated political campaigns, such as Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, India's first Minister of Law, who led numerous civil rights campaigns for the equality of India's untouchable classes, of which he himself was a member. His formal adoption of Buddhism in his later life has continued to serve as a beacon to low and outcast Indians to realise the civilizational ethics of India's great Ashokan period. Another INEB visionary is Thich Nhat Hanh, who was part of the anti-war movement in Vietnam that supported neither the communist forces nor the US-backed ones, but rather strove for solutions for peace and interbeing among all Vietnamese. In this way, we are reminded of that key Buddhist concept of interbeing, in which participatory governance serves to balance economic development, natural resource management, and grassroots decision-making. The Dharma of diversity also moves us away from the fusion of state, ethnicity, and religion, and towards multicultural societies based in relationship and connection, rather than individualism and personal consumption. Inspired by these values and these exemplars, INEB members are engaged in a variety of actions for good governance by promoting understanding, cooperation, and networking among Buddhist groups, religious groups, social action groups, and secular civil society organisations. By activating these communities for collective engagement with the present system, we seek to build complex and adaptive social systems which are people-friendly, and non-exploitative of all beings in the environment.
Thank you for listening. If you would like to join our movement, support it with whatever means you have, or keep informed about it through regular media, please do contact our main office in Bangkok through our homepage or any one of our wide web of core members in your region through our Facebook page.